Hi, my name is Victoria and I just got into law school. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my law school application experience, including my stats, timeline, and general strategy that got me into Columbia Law School. So for some background and numbers, I graduated from a top 15 undergraduate university as a film major, and after graduating, I worked at an entertainment company in New York for a few years, doing work that was not law related. So my resume was pretty full and I actually had to spend a lot of time trying to trim it down, but it still ended up being a full 2 pages long. My stats were 3.6 something GPA and a 175 LSAT. And while I wish I could, unfortunately, there's no way for me to go back and redo undergrad to change my GPA, so the best that I could do was to really focus on my application strategy as a whole. Because I do not have any law background, my general strategy was, of course, to put more importance on my LSAT and my essays, but it was also just to tell a well-rounded and unique story of why I was choosing to switch into law, why I'm choosing to do that now, and how my background and experiences up until this point are going to help me with that transition. Especially since a lot of schools are emphasizing holistic reviews now, which basically means that your application is more than just your numbers. I made sure to put a lot of thought into the overall story that the admissions team would take from my application and how that would make me stand out compared to other applicants who might have similar stats as me. I remember in a Georgetown Law info session, they said that at least for their school, when they look at an application, the LSAT counted for a third, GPA counted for a third, and everything else accounted for that final third part of the pie. And of course, that formula is just what Georgetown said, and even then it differs case by case based on each applicant's background, but that pie chart really stuck with me. And some other things that I made sure to do as part of my general application strategy was to write addendums, have strong recommendation letters, and to get my applications in as early as possible in the cycle because law school admissions happen on a rolling basis. So that brings us to my timeline. Most schools open their applications at the beginning of September and some in mid-September, but basically I wanted to have everything that I could possibly have ready as they could be by September 1st. Now that was just a lofty goal of mine, and I definitely was not 100% ready to submit on September 1st because even after schools release their applications, you still have to, go back and adjust the materials that you had prepared based on their instructions, but I definitely did get the majority of my work done before September. And here's how I made that happen. So first, for the LSAT. The first time I took the LSAT was in August of 2020 when I scored a 168, and the second time I took it was June 2023 when I scored a 175. Now, I can make a separate video on LSAT prep and how I studied later, but being done with the test in June gave me a solid few months to really focus on my essays. But actually, almost as soon as I finished the LSAT, the first thing that I did was start strategizing and reaching out to people for recommendation letters. Generally, law schools will ask for maybe 1 to 3 or max 4 recommendation letters, and you definitely do not need to hit the maximum number that they allow. But for me, because I was out of undergrad for a few years and I had a few years of work experience as well, I wanted to make sure to have at least 1 academic letter and at least 1 professional letter. So to be safe, I reached out to 2 undergraduate professors and 2 of my supervisors from work. I believe in mid-July was when I reached out by email. And just really quickly wanted to share my template for asking for these recommendation letters. So what I did was just in an email, at the top, really quickly introduce myself if it's been a while, update on how I've been and how I've gotten to this point of applying to law school. And then I would ask for the letter and give them generally an idea of what the commitment would be. So I told them it's just 1 single letter, usually about a page long, that will help the admissions team paint a fuller picture of me and show evidence of my personal and professional growth, blah, blah, blah. And then give them a deadline, like say, if you're willing to write this for me, let me know if last week of August would be a doable deadline. So the reason why I reached out quite early, like in July, even though I wasn't going to submit until September or October, is because 1, you want to give them enough time to actually write you a good letter without feeling rushed. And 2, you really never know what the other person's situation might be. For example, when I sent out one of these emails asking for a letter, I got an automated email back saying that this person was going to be out of office and unavailable for the next 3 weeks. So I'm very glad that I started reaching out early. And stuff like this is not something that you want to be stressing out about or chasing people down for the week before you submit. And then of course, the rest of my time was spent brainstorming, writing, editing, rewriting, and stressing out about my essays. Most schools require a personal statement, which is usually around 2 pages long, and then many schools also have extra required or optional supplemental essays. Now, all of these essay prompts can change year to year, but if you look up resources online, you'll see that they generally stay along the same lines and usually follow the same topics. So I spent a lot of time reflecting and jotting down ideas regarding my background and motivation for going to law school, what makes me unique and what I think I could bring to a law school, and of course why I want to go to each of these schools that I'm applying to. I can make a more in-depth video about actually writing my essays, but I'd say that indecisiveness was one of my biggest frustrations during this part of the application process. So basically, a lot of these prompts that the schools will give are quite broad or open-ended, so I couldn't decide what topic to write about, and I would keep giving up halfway and starting a brand new idea that I had. I'd say my biggest tip for the essay writing part is if you have an idea, try to stick with it and flush it out to see what it would be like, rather than doubting yourself and overthinking before you could even get anything on paper. And for the supplemental essays, obviously if it's required, you should write it, but for the optional ones, I tried my best to write as many optional essays as I thought that I could write strong essays for. So I didn't just write an optional topic just so I could write it, but I looked at all the topics, and if one of them resonated with me, I wanted to take that optional opportunity to show the admissions team maybe a different side of me that isn't reflected in the rest of my application, or maybe take it as a chance to show them my creativity or my specific interest in their school. Also, the entire summer I was signing up for info sessions on law school websites. I'd say most schools ramp these up more in the fall, like in September, but I got in there early just to double check what each of the schools was looking for in their applications, and also just to learn more about each of the schools themselves. So by the beginning of September, I already had my personal statement in a pretty good place, and I had a diversity statement in a pretty good place. But when schools started releasing their applications on September 1st, I definitely still had a lot of adjustments that I had to make. So most of September was spent writing, editing, and rewriting based on any new prompts that were released, or just adjusting essays that I already had to better fit each of the different schools. And something really important to pay attention to at this point is details. Each school is going to release like a few pages of detailed instructions, and you don't want to miss the one line that has the word count requirement or the font size recommendation, especially consistency. So consistency of font size between your resume and your essays and your supplemental statements, consistency in the margins and the headers, things like that are really important. I ended up submitting all of my applications in the final few days of September and also a bit into October, I think. And then October onwards was just waiting, and interviews. So my first 2 interview invites both came at the beginning of October, and they were from Georgetown and Washington University, St. Louis. And also both of those invites came about 1 week after I submitted my applications at the end of September. So I felt like I was already seeing the benefits of submitting early. And then after interviewing, I was accepted to both Georgetown and WashU about 2 weeks after interviewing. And then the rest of October and November was just a waiting game until November 28th, right after Thanksgiving, I got an interview invite from Columbia. So I got the invite and then I interviewed the week after, and then I think I got accepted about a week and a half after that, so everything happened pretty fast. And now to end off with just some general advice from my experience. My first piece of advice would be to ask for help, but know when to stop. I definitely got a lot of help at every single stage during this entire process, from my parents, my cousins, my friends, online sources, and even some paid services like LSAT prep courses. And it's very helpful to have a lot of different opinions and information while you're studying and researching. But like I said, I personally had a problem with indecisiveness, which I think cost me a lot of time. And I think that maybe having too many opinions contributed to that. Everyone is going to say different things and have different opinions, and even two people who went to the same law school could come out of it giving you completely different advice. So I would say that if gathering too much advice or information is getting overwhelming or repetitive, probably at that point you've done enough research and you just need to make a decision. My second piece of advice is kind of a caveat to something that I've been talking about throughout this video. So while my goal was to submit my applications early in the cycle, I definitely think that a stronger, more complete, and double and triple checked application is always going to be better than an early one. I would not have submitted my applications so early, like in September or October, if I didn't think that they were 100% as strong as I believe they could be. And my final piece of advice is to be your own best advocate. You are the most important aspect of this application, more than your LSAT scores or your GPAs or recommendation letters. Especially while writing these essays, you're trying to tell a story of something that happened to you, which nobody knows better than you. So when you're thinking about like, why do I want to go to law school? Or what is something that happened to me that shaped me into who I am today? Nobody is going to know the answer to those questions better than you do, not your parents or your boyfriend or your therapist. And chances are, the more genuine of a story that you tell, the more it's going to mean to the admissions team. So that was a lot, but I hope that it was helpful, and I hope that I could kind of leave this as a digital memory of how my 2023 went, and I hope I could look back and still feel proud of myself in a few years. Yeah, thanks for watching.